Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And I am so delighted that you are here with us today. We have a very exciting, and it's going to be busy show. So keep your eyes on the screen. Get a pen in hand because I'm sure that there are going to be some things you're going to want to write down, and invite anybody you want. Call them up on the phone right now, everyone, because we're talking about equality. And today we are going to celebrate Women's Equality Day. And it just happened to turn around today. We didn't know it when we booked this show, but we do now. So we're really excited. So before we get on with our show, I just want to say hi to Annan.
Hello, Marilyn. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. You enjoying the weather finally?
Oh my God, it's lovely. I
Yep.
could be outside and my hair's not frizzing and all that stuff.
Yep.
It's lovely.
Very
I love
nice.
it. And can eat outside. It's been really beautiful. So on with our show. Please remember that you are welcome to connect with us. And today we have a very busy show. So if you would like to comment, ask questions, whatever you like, please join us in our chat. You can put your name under our video and nickname, whatever you like. You can ask questions there. We will monitor it and we will ask away. So we have April, we have two Saharas, and we have Mary joining us today. And maybe we might even have a Teresa. So I want to welcome all of you here today. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Hey. Hey.
Hi.
Hey, it's nice to have you all.
Hi.
Be here. Thanks.
So I'm going to ask, first of all, I'm going to ask April, who's been on our show before and we love. April, hi.
Hi. Happy Women's Equality Day.
Happy Women's Equality Day to you. Any equality day is everybody's equality day, I feel like. So first of all, tell everybody who you are, April.
I'm April Young Bennett. I'm the host of the Religious Feminism podcast. I'm the author of Ask a Suffragist, Stories and Wisdom from America's First Feminists, and I'm a Mormon feminist.
Which is an interesting combination at that, right? So why don't you?
It's very needed.
It's very, yeah. So go ahead, if you will, and start to introduce our other guests so we can get on with our conversation.
Great. Today we have Zahara Khan and Zahara Ayubi with us from Feminist Islamic Troublemakers of North America. And we have Mary Dispenza from the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. You might remember them from the movie Spotlight. That was the activist group that was highlighted in that movie. And if we're lucky, I think we have Teresa coming on right now. Teresa Anyugar is part of Women's Ordination Conference and the Roman Catholic Women's Priests.
And we have Mary. Oh, you said
I did introduce Mary.
Oh, you did. Okay, I just want to
Yes.
make sure. Okay, okay, perfect. We don't want to forget everybody, right? Okay, so let's go around so everybody knows who everybody is. So Teresa, hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Are
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So are you a troublemaker?
I would say so.
Okay, good. We're going to get to that in a minute. That might have to be my first question. Okay, so you hold on tight. Sahara, are you here? Sahara, Sahara from Dartmouth, right? Are you here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm here.
Say hi. Okay, so you said hi. Now the other Sahara? Is Sahara here? Hey, there she is.
Here. Sorry, I had myself on mute.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're going to call you Blue Hat Sahara. No, not really, but welcome to you. And Mary, do you want to say hi?
I do. Good morning, everyone. I'm just thrilled to be here with the others and to have this opportunity. Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and may this be the beginning of many times together.
Yes.
So, April, start us off. What is the central core of this particular group?
We're all religious feminists, so we're working within our faith communities to make them more egalitarian, a little less patriarchal. And these are all amazing women that we have on this panel today who have done great things within their communities to promote the cause of women and, of course, humankind, because we all know that women's rights are human rights.
Exactly. So, Sahara Ayubi, why don't you start? Tell us about your work specifically and what you are involved with and how today matters so much to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I am a professor at Dartmouth, so a lot of what I do is teaching and research and writing. And my area of specialty is gender and Islam, and particularly gender and Islamic ethics and Muslim thought, as well as studying Muslim feminist movements and so on. So I teach about that, and I find that teaching is a big part of my activist work um, because being a scholar activist is an important part of my identity and what I hope is I can impart to students, college students of today. And they're not just Muslim students, obviously. At Dartmouth, there's a full diversity of students, and um, people who come to my classes are already sort of self-selected, but also many students who don't necessarily know much about Islam and who want to educate themselves about gender debates within the Muslim tradition. So I find that my work in the classroom is both to educate but also create awareness about right now and contemporary issues surrounding gender debates. Not limited to the Muslim tradition, not limited to Muslim communities, but certainly that's a big part of what I do. And then I also my research work is on these topics, and I just wrote a book, Gendered Morality: Classical Islamic Ethics of the Self, Family, and Society. And in that work is basically sort of a feminist critique, if you will, of gender discourses within the Islamic ethics tradition, pre-modern Islamic ethics tradition that is still very relevant today. And so that's that scholarly life, I think, scholar teacher life is a big part of my life, my big part of my time. And then in terms of my community, certainly all of these debates come to the fore when I participate in my local Muslim community, as well as I'm from Boston, and so the Boston area as well.
Mhm. Well, it's very important, and first of all, that we are talking about this because there are times that I'm not sure that freedom and liberation and equality exists in some communities. So it's important that we do talk
Mhm.
about it and we do realize the truth. So thank you, Sahar, so much for explaining it. So, um, okay, Teresa, you're on. So why don't you go next?
Okay. Well, similar to SAR, okay, so the work that I do is within the Roman Catholic tradition. And the impetus for my passion about women being ordained in the Catholic Church is because I felt called to be ordained within the Catholic Church. And then I would end up pursuing a master's degree in feminist theology and learning about how women have been marginalized in the church by Christian traditions or different doctrines. But a lot of my work is just reframing textual or historical interpretations about women's involvement in the church. And so I'm involved with the Women's Ordination Conference in Washington, D.C., which is a national organization that was founded, I want to say, in 1976 or 1977, when women at that time in the Catholic Church wanted to be able to have a space to have that conversation. And it paralleled a conversation with the Episcopal Church at that same moment in time, where there was 11 women that were ordained illicitly by a bishop. But the thing is, because those women were ordained, you cannot undo an ordination. So I've been working with the Women's Ordination Conference. There's also another group that many people may not know about, the Roman Catholic Women Priest Movement, which actually is an interesting movement that, again, we had women that were ordained by bishops in Europe, and then those bishops came to the United States and ordained women. And when individuals are ordained by a bishop, you can undo it. But so I'm a part of movements within the Catholic Church that I would say for the most part are on the margins, but are radically trying to reaffirm the authentic teachings of Jesus, which was radical inclusiveness. So yes, my scholarship has to do on ecclesiology, the study of church. My book on 17th century Latina feminist, ecofeminist, Serwani Inés de la Cruz, reflects on how her Nova Hispana feminist perspective was very inclusive. So because she embraced her Nahuatl Mexican heritage, her indigenous background, her Spanish and non-Spanish individuals in her 17th century historical moment.
Okay.
So my scholarship and my activism kind of parallel, but it comes from my personal experience of feeling disempowered as a woman, that because God is gendered and as Jesus is gendered male, then women have been historically undermined in terms of our divinity.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting, and then I'm going to introduce the rest, but I find it interesting to say that once you're ordained, and no
Yes.
matter what, even a woman. I mean, I guess when they made that rule, they didn't even include women, but what can you, if you don't include women now, what will happen? So interesting point. So let me go right to Mary, because that kind of goes into Mary. What about you?
Well, I am a survivor of nun abuse and priest abuse, and spent over half a lifetime in the Catholic Church. And my present work is I'm a leader for SNAP in the Northwest and a contact for those abused by nuns. So all of this work, of course, is about destroying the power, I guess, that exists, especially in the clergy, as they hide and protect sex abuse, and breaking that down is something that I do as I work with each survivor, and they begin to find their own voice and tell their own truth, and finally speak truth to power. And as you know, it's a lifetime work. I grew up in East Los Angeles. I was abused by the priest when I was 7. I went in to Catholic high school. I entered the convent right out of high school. I stayed for 15 years. Eventually ended up directing the Pastoral Life Services Department for the Catholic Archdiocese. For some unknown reason, I finally faced my sexual orientation as while I was directing the Pastoral Life Services Department, and that was not the best place to come out. And I did indeed, and I was fired. And so I had a moment of really understanding the power of the Catholic Church and the hierarchy and the patriarchy. And that threw me into a lot of work and involvement on behalf of the LGBT community, then finally I faced my abuse by the parish priest and eventually the nun, and then began to give all of my passion and commitment and volunteer work to helping others find their voice, speak their truth, reclaim their lives, and move on in freedom and equality.
Thank you for, I mean, it's just amazing to hear all of you. And I have a question for you, Mary, but before I go, I want to welcome Sahara also, and just give us some of what your background is too, and bring us up to date.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to apologize a little bit for the noisy environment. I'm actually at the hospital today getting some treatment, but I wanted to join this. I'm one of the co-founders of the Feminist Islamic Troublemakers of North America, and for which the acronym is FITNA. And fitna is an Arabic word that's translated like it's usually as like sedition, corruption, temptation, discord, all these various meanings that, amount to trouble. And it's something that's sort of leveled at Muslim feminists from like within the community, from people who are very sexist. And sometimes all women are sort of called the fitna for men because women are a temptation. And so we wanted to take that word and turn it around on its head and make it into something positive. And the way we're defining our organization is we're focusing on creating constructive disruption around gender issues in the Muslim community. And so that's sort of like the umbrella of the work that we're doing now. My own background is I'm a lay person in the Islamic studies space, but I'm an engineer by training and I work on Mars exploration. What I do this in my spare time to really bring the work of scholars such as Zara Ayubi and other people to the Muslim community, because scholars like Zara are neglected in terms of like invitations to mosques and even panels that like interfaith organizations may convene. They're often inviting imams from the mosques, and as you may know, like probably more than 90% of mosques have male imams, and many people would say that you can't have a female imam. And so a lot of this discourse that, this really rich discourse that Dr. Ayubi and others are part of, that's really left out of Muslim communities and non-Muslim communities. And so my hope is to really be sort of like the hype woman, to bring all this like rich information out to the Muslim community and the wider community in the US and Canada. And so some of the things that we've done is we had a conference in Boston when I was living there, where we brought together scholars and activists from all over New England to talk about Islamic feminism. And we also have held some events where lectures by Islamic feminist scholars in California now that I've moved here. And then some online campaigns where we've worked with other organizations to put out statements and articles in support of sexual abuse survivors within the Muslim community. So these are people who've suffered from like spiritual abuse from Muslim leaders, and it's one of those things where we're in a really difficult place because the community is afraid of talking about some of this for fears that Islamophobes will take that information and try to like malign the Muslim community as a whole for us raising these questions. And so we're in this difficult place where there are these concerns that women have, but it's kind of hard to raise them in the environment that we live in here in the US, where there's a lot of Islamophobia and racism that we have to tackle with, and we have to be careful how we approach that so we don't make that kind of thing worse.
Well, you want people to listen. And, people are not gonna listen if we're yelling at them. I mean, I believe that it has to come out in the right way. So my question and let me start with April. How I look at all this and say we're doing great. How are we doing, April?
We are doing great. Women have more rights than ever before. I mean, we haven't reached the pinnacle. There's still a long way to go, but I do think that there's a lot of progress in the movement. And I think that when you look at any movement, we want to see it going just up, up, up. Everything's better, better, better. But what we usually see more often is a sense of there's two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward, one step back. And so sometimes we're going to see some reactions and we're going to see some setbacks and things are going to go back a little bit. But I do think that overall, in the long run, we are moving in the right direction and it's
Mhm,
exciting.
mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, for me to have all of you here, from you each have are working in similar goals, but a different piece
Mhm.
of the puzzle, which I find to be very exciting, and I know that there's more of you. You know, I mean,
Mm.
there's more of you from different religions, walks of life that could come on and also share. So, I do wanna get some more fine tuning and understand more about what paths we're taking and what else we need to do. Like, what do we need to do? Like, just a layman like myself or anybody, what do we need to do?
Mhm.
So, um, Sahara, so she, she mentioned that you were a scholar and you're working on these things. So what do you see with your kids that you're, in school? I mean, what questions are they asking?
I think uh, what Zahra Khan was getting at is a really important point that I want to pick up, and
Okay.
that is also related to my students as well, which is that there is this tension between being able to talk about things that are ugly within a community, include which are not limited to, but certainly, especially. Gender inequality or patriarchal practices and things like that. Um, to be able to, so there's a tension between being able to talk about those issues and also safeguard oneself and one's community from um, being vulnerable to racists and anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobes and so on. And I think even with students and the questions that they are asking sort of are indicative of the place where they're coming from. So there's so many students, and I'm talking about students who are not heritage students, so like non-Muslim students, right? Who want to be allies, who want to understand. Many of the questions that they're asking are coming from a very how should I put this? A very uh, concerned and very genuine place of wanting to be allies and wanting to be helpful and wanting to learn more and to be able to create awareness. But much of those questions also indicate a kind of ignorance as far as the Muslim community, as far as the particular issues that Muslim women might encounter within a given community, or within a given family or whatever. And so there is this so that tension between vulnerability from vulnerability as well as wanting to actually make change is definitely present within student life as well, because the students are at the same time combating their inner racist or inner biased assumptions that they might be walking in with. And because someone is feminist, or because someone is wanting to help women make change, or Muslim women make change, doesn't necessarily take away some of the some bigoted assumptions that people might be
Right.
walking in with.
What I'm hearing is, and correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, anybody, and please feel free to engage also, is the fact that you're not only, carving out to create equality for women, but you've got this umbrella, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Islam, whether it's a priest. I mean, you've got these umbrellas that you've got to clean up too. I mean, because we all, we have judgments about all of this, overall, and you're having to clean it. So I think you're having to clean some of that up in order to create your equality path for women.
Well, one of the things that April said is that we all know that women's rights are human rights, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, and I think that that's certainly a really important sentiment that might go in tandem with, say, intersectionality, which is basically this idea that women are not just women, right? They are also other things. They are also they also carry an ethnic background. They also carry religious background. They also may or may not, right? They may carry class background of a certain type, and so on. So people are not just one identity, right? There are many things. And as you said, as far as an umbrella and dealing with, all of multiple issues at the same time, it's really part of that, right? So if we talk about Muslim women's rights or within a given community, we're also dealing with issues of class and immigration and as well as education and a whole host of other things that go into a woman's position or positionality within her community.
Right.
So the issues are intersectional, the people are intersectional, and certainly activism needs to be that way as
And
well.
at least we're coming up with sensitivity. So, Mary, I wanted to ask you when you said something. So, were you sexually assaulted by a nun as well?
Yes,
So you were.
but yes, it's an amazing thing to me that it was only a year ago. And I only say my age so you can get a sense of all this. I'm 79 now. It was a year ago that I finally named the event as sexual abuse. And perhaps other women or men may do this, where you go, you have this experience that is sexual and is abuse, but you say, or I did, I left it saying, that was weird, that was strange, that was confusing. And that's what I did as a very young, I was a postulant at the time. And I just buried it away. And every once in a while I'd share it. And all of us would say, well, that was weird. I must tell it because why you'll see why we just said that was weird. That was strange. So I was on the postulant line, and the novice uh, mistress was walking us back up to the novitiate. We had to go through the patio down below where the chapel was and the main convent. And so as I'm following with my line, you never left that line as a postulant. Uh, a superior tapped me from the convent below, pulled me off the line, and so for me that would be very frightening, very confusing in itself, and brought me to her room. And in those days, you knelt very close to the nun when you want to ask or share anything to the superior. So basically, I'm kneeling very close to her. I don't remember the words before or after, but she took my face between her hands and kissed me all over. And I left. And I believe I had the same feelings as with the priest at 7. I was confused, alone, abandoned, found my group, walked back up the hill, found the group of it, I believe, but the novice mistress never asked me where I was, and I was probably gone for about 15 minutes. So that's the story that I held all the time as that was weird, that was crazy, that was strange. But it was a year ago, having done so much work now with those abused by nuns and hearing their very, very sensitive stories, that it forced me, in a good sense, to say that was sexual abuse. So it's only a year ago that I came to terms with that reality.
Mary, let me ask you, and I don't know if this is a quick question, okay? And this is something I'd like to know from everybody. What is it that you want to have happen? What's your goal?
Had happened back
Yeah,
then,
for the work. No, now for the work you're doing based on where you've come. What do you want to accomplish?
Well, of course, the truth. The truth. The passage, the truth shall set you free, can be used in a lot of different ways. But nevertheless, in truth there is power, and so I want the clergy, those who have been abused by priests, want the stories released. They want perpetrators held accountable, reported to police. They want the records turned over. And same for survivors of non-abuse. They want their perpetrators or those accused of abuse, they want their names in print. They want the story to become real. And in that, they too find validation in their lives and their stories. They want those who are guilty to be removed from their positions, in some cases totally removed from the religious community or the priesthood, or removed from children. Everything they need to do to keep children and others safe needs to happen. And some really do need financial recompense. And I want to see that given to them. I speak to many who barely have a place to live. They have mental and physical the impact of the sexual abuse, and they don't have money for the treatment they need. They can't get what they need. And some are alcoholic. Results of abuse have made working difficult for them. So I want their day in the sun, so to speak, where whatever it is they want, they get. And there are resources and support to make that happen.
Well, that doesn't sound like too much, and it sounds like a whole lot, doesn't it? I mean, really, when you think about it. But, I've never spoken to anyone who had been abused by a priest or a nun. So, today, unfortunately, is a good day because I get to, huh?
I think so.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
I
think
think that
just talking about these things is relevant, because we haven't spoken about this before, and it's real, and we're talking about things that are real. So, thank you, Mary, for sharing all that. And
you're welcome.
yeah, now
Thanks.
you're very welcome. So, Teresa,
Yeah.
you said some things that were pretty powerful to me, and
Yeah.
so like what is the thing for you? What is the
That
thing that you are marking your work on, that you are gauging success on?
Gosh, that was such a wonderful big question when you had asked it to Mary. And I'm like, what is it that I want? I want a church that actually listens to women. I want a church that is radically inclusive. I want inclusive language. I want women preaching. I want um I I am very, I guess, anti-clericalism. I'm
And
not sure how to turn the church
okay, so
upside
let me
down
ask you
because
this question. When you see
yeah,
women doing that, what will be the changes? What will we see when we see women as clergy? How will it be?
see, I'm not sure. This is such a complicated topic
Okay.
about women becoming clergy because the system is not going to change just by having like, a woman become a priest.
Mhm.
So I mean it's a total, it's really a
W-
big
Well, what are
it's
the
like a
women
different
doing? What are the women doing that were ordained? How are
the
they
Roman
how are
Catholic
they
women
using
priest.
that? Huh?
See, okay, so now that's an interesting thing because I have talked with Roman Catholic women priests and trying to figure out their leadership style is very different from the Roman Catholic Church. And something that Olivia Doko had said is that within the Roman Catholic women priest movement, they're not authoritarian. The
Mhm.
Catholic Church is more authoritarian, like they're a dictator. But the Roman Catholic women priests, their leadership style is not as oh gosh, what is the word?
Controlling?
Controlling.
I mean, you're
But
right.
the thing is that I
Okay.
do think women do, I mean, lead in different ways.
Mhm.
And I think that the structure of the Catholic Church, you know what, it it supports male leadership dominance. And I do feel like the Roman Catholic women priest movement is what, everyone is included. It's more
Okay.
authentic to what Christianity was in Jesus's time.
Mhm.
I think
Um,
I think it's important that I feel like a challenge for me is that many of the feminists that I know are often now theologians, scholars, but they've left the church.
Mhm.
And I think the people in the pews need us. For those who are Catholic feminists, I did a presentation 3 weeks ago to the Sisters of Social Service, and I talked with them about feminist Christologies. And it was so empowering to them to hear what women's contributions are within the academy today. And I'm working here with seniors at a Catholic girls high school, and I'm talking about Sir Juan Inez de la Cruz and talking about how you don't have to agree with the church on everything. And actually, women have offered better significant contributions, and men have undermined those. So I think the work is big and small,
Yeah.
but the end
Yeah.
goal, women being ordained priests, is not going to make the changes in the church.
Well, we had a
Oh,
gentleman on a while ago who his church. I mean, he went the regular route, and he left the traditional church, created his own church, and they are working on the rituals because he didn't like he believed in the he believed in Christianity, but he didn't believe in the way it was being packaged,
yeah,
basically. So, I think
mm,
that that's a real important, we have to know something about where we're going or what we
yeah,
want. Even if we don't have to know the end, we just have to know the bits and pieces of what
mhm,
we want. Like I see Sahara with you and your students, I see you one of the most delightful things I've heard from you in a way, and then I want to go to the other Sahara too, is kind of um, understand understanding the threat of Islam and what it is and what it isn't. Because with that hanging over our head, we can't see straight about what it is. There's no way we can understand it if we're so scared of it. And it's interesting so I want to talk to you about that. But before we do, I want to go to the other Sahara. Are you here? Is she still here? She's
I
on
think
mute.
she's off.
She's
Yeah,
off?
I think she dropped off.
Oh, she did. Okay. I'm going to have her back on again too. And so I know some about April because April's been on before. April, you're here, right?
I am, yes.
So, because this was a shock. I mean, Mormon. I mean, we have a woman who is like, strong in the Mormon church was astounding to me. That's how this whole thing got opened up. So, give a little bit more about that and what you're looking for. And then we're going to go back to Sahara about, about the Islam. But go ahead, tell us some, because I think some of our audience could be new and what
I
you're
think
looking for.
that one thing about my faith, which is pretty much in common with many of the other faiths, since I've talked to people of many different faith communities, is that there are different ways to interpret the theology. And you can interpret it in an expansive way that is inclusive of everyone and that allows for really progressive views. Or you can interpret it in a very patriarchal way, which brings women down and also other people, often people of marginalized genders and of different races, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic statuses. And so there are different ways to interpret the theology. And unfortunately, because historically men have had so much power and patriarchal religious traditions, they're often interpreting the theology in a way that is harmful to women. And because women are excluded so much, we find there's kind of a chain reaction that comes from that, where because women are excluded from positions of leadership within their faith community, including mine, they, the men in power, sometimes intentionally and sometimes completely obliviously, because they just don't have women at the table to let them know when they're doing things that are harmful to women, start to cause these problems. And one thing that we do see that's really frightening within very patriarchal, both secular traditions and religious traditions, is we see a lot of abuse happening. We do find that when a community is more egalitarian, whether it is a secular community or a religious community, that women are safer. That's just something that happens in more egalitarian communities. And so that's something that a lot of women within my faith are working toward. We do love the theology in many ways, and there are ways to interpret it that are simply beautiful and wonderful. And that's true of most faith traditions.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because totally agree with you about the interpretation. I mean, I always say about a lot of rules, like who made them anyway? I mean, who
Yeah.
started the interpretation and who, we just kind of went along for the ride. But when you look at, when you really get into it, I mean, really, what is it saying? So, Sahara, you're, oh, she is? Okay. Sahara, you here? Khan? Oh, it's,
I had
yeah.
no problem.
Okay, there you are. So I don't know if you heard some of what we've been talking about, and everybody's kind of talking about in some ways their own thing, but then there's this overlapping thing that is just there. So because we want to get a lot out at one time. So we've been talking some about what the game is, what the outcome is for each of you in the work that you're doing. What do you see as your main goal? So what would be, and I know what you said early on, that you're there getting the information out, right? That's your main goal. And is there something that you see in getting it out? Do you see a resistance? Do you see an opening of a heart? What do you see?
So I mean, like as you mentioned, really getting the information out, but really having people start these conversations, because I don't think having these conversations at a large scale in the community, there's like, sometimes it feels like we're preaching to the converted, but even there, people have been struggling with a lot of these ideas for a while, and they just haven't had access to like scholarly information, talking about these issues. And so one of the things that I see happens as this information gets out to more and more people, that especially within younger people, that we are able to have these in like the community itself, maybe through more panels or town halls or discussion groups, and it's something that at least people talk about. And we're so early stage that I can't think about sort of reform at this point, but at some point I would like to see reform. Like an example would be, I've actually been talking about this on Facebook for the last couple of days, but marriage contracts, right? So marriage contracts in the Muslim community, you sign a civil contract, of course, but there's also a religious contract that a lot of Muslims use. In Muslim countries, it might be the same as a civil contract, it's a legal contract. But in the U.S., people may sign as an additional thing, but it's still maybe legal. And so, a lot of the ways that these things were based on patriarchal assumptions about the role of men and women in marriage. And of course, we're talking about heterosexual marriage here, so I just want to start off with that. But so in that sense, I want people to think about, how would you change it to make it more egalitarian? How do you unpack the assumptions that are baked into like those, and how are they actually affecting women today? Are some of these things no longer relevant? And if not, like how do we change? At this point in time, we're not really having those conversations here. I've seen some work, like for example in the UK, there's groups, Muslim lawyers groups, that are putting out like alternative versions of contracts that are more egalitarian. They're encouraging Muslims to use them, but they're not as popular as sort of the standard thing that you use. And that's just one example, like where I would like. So the first step is just that people don't have this information that's already available out there. We want to start these conversations so that we as a community can move forward. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing, it's more outward facing. We've mostly been like inward facing. I'm glad we're having conversations like these here, because there's a lot of conversations within the larger feminist community where Muslims are generally left out of. And I think I'm going to create a little bit of trouble here in this show. One of the things that was said earlier on, and I can't remember who said it, but it was, this is something that people assume that, the work of like freedom and liberation of women is not going on in the Muslim community. And that's just, this is something that I've seen my entire life. I grew up in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, and there's been never a shortage of women fighting for our rights. And it's really a failure of like Western media, or rather the bias of Western media, not told. And so there's women in the feminist movement here that are just not aware of the work that Muslims have been doing for centuries. And so that's
I don't think a lot. I mean, I'm not aware of all the work that's being done. I mean, I'm not reading all of your materials, and I'm not in your classrooms, and I don't know all the work that's being done. So I'm in awe of the fact that you have this is going on in general. And my question is, who is your biggest roadblock? Who's making it the hardest for change to happen? Like whether it's a marriage contract, I mean, whatever it is. I mean, who's saying no?
Men.
Men. And how are
Men
they?
are.
Go ahead. And how are they saying? How are men saying no? Who said that? Mary.
I did, Mary.
Mary, how are men saying no?
Well, historically, we all know it. We've been saying it. They hold the power, have held the power. They control the narrative. They control the dialogue. Most leaders around the world are male, and have always been the ones who control. And even from the religious perspective, as has been said.
So if that's the case, how have you gotten this far? That's
a lot of hard work.
So
And,
yeah. So how have you gotten this far? How is the work that you're doing being received? With the roadblock. So, and I think, Sahara, you got a smile on your face. So can you answer that?
Sure. I mean, I think particularly for Muslim communities, it's not, just generic men. It's actually particularly, you know, sort of two fronts, the roadblocks coming on two fronts, one being um, the from outside of the community, right? So outside of Muslim faith tradition, there's plenty of stereotypes about Muslim women and Muslim women's positionality, their history, their lives, their lifestyles, their status, and so on and so forth, which is very sensationalized. Historically, it was about the narrative was about how Muslim women are scantily clad and sexually promiscuous and available for men, and now the external stereotype is sort of the opposite, that they are completely veiled and covered and secluded and sequestered in
Right.
these
Right.
spaces. And so that narrative shift is sort of two sides of the same coin of this eroticism and mystique of Muslim women coming from the outside world, placed onto Muslim women. And Muslim men become very aware of this, right? That one of the major stereotypes about Islam, apart from the whole, Muslims are violent nonsense, is the gender stereotypes, right? And so Muslim men are very aware of this, and one of the things that Muslim women have to deal with then is the fact that we are told constantly that Islam itself and Muslims itself as a community as a whole are under attack, and so right now is not the time to deal with Muslim women's issues or specific issues, whether it's marriage contracts or access to the mosque, access space in the mosque, egalitarian space in the mosque, or egalitarian decision making within a community, whatever the issues are, right? That the idea that now is not the time because we have larger fish to fry as a community.
Mm-hmm.
And so that pressure from within is actually placed from without, right? From outside of the community, and that's something that is sort of a what we call, like, I guess, a double patriarchy, right? Double patriarchal issues that Muslim women have to deal with. It's and a lot of it is originating from outside of the Muslim community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and a lot of that, bigotry and stereotypes about Muslims in general is coming from racism and xenophobic attitudes that then get filtered into Muslim communities, and Muslim communities then and particularly Muslim men react to it by becoming more and more insular and conservative. And so Muslim women then have to deal with that. So as far as your question about, what do you want to see and what's the end goal, I think for me in particular, and I'm so glad that I'm able to have partners like Zahra Khan and in Fitna, the feminist troublemakers of North America, because the end goal is, for me, is to produce the scholarship, but also to help to get it out there, right? In terms of in both within the community and outside of the community, to talk more about inclusion, right? So inclusivity, sort of as a broad, if I wanted to use one term as to what the end goal is, it's inclusivity, right? Inclusivity in terms of, the ideas about gender have been so far within the Muslim tradition have been patriarchal, have been male dominated. So inclusivity of women's voices, women's experiences, even women in scholarship, right? So scholarship about Islam happens to be a male dominated field, right? Islamic studies happens to be a male dominated field. But women scholars then are able to, even if they are not specifically studying questions of gender, when women scholars do scholarship, they are automatically not necessarily assuming male normativity. Of course, many are, because that's how we've been trained. But the idea is that when you have inclusivity, right, when you have more women at the table, whether it's at like the the executive board of a mosque, or in a Muslim school, or in a given community, or even within a family. When you have Muslim women, or when you have women as leaders and as people with respected voices,
Mhm.
the idea is that the end result will be less bias, will be more
Right.
egalitarian. As I think,
So that's all women. We need all women coming to the table, not just not, we need, I mean, I'm Jewish, we need all women coming to the table.
sure,
So, yeah, right? So we
absolutely,
can spread this this stuff, that we spread with what we need to have going on, what we need, because I mean, I work with a lot of men in my practice. I work with a lot of women, but I work with a lot of men, and I'm finding men to just be, I like men. I mean, I didn't always like men. I can't say growing up a Jewish, in a Jewish family, very strong Jewish energy, male energy. I didn't always like men. They scared me. But now when I'm out in the world and I'm grown up and I see what they don't seem to know, what they can't seem to express, what they want to express, what they're waiting for us to say, in a lot of cases, I'm finding that I want to help more men. We can't, I'm the founder of a networking organization for women. And there's lots of things we don't let men come to, but I feel like we've got to bring everybody to the table. So I was going to say, this is a fast show, fast and dirty. All of you have had just a little bit of time to really express yourself. So I want to invite you all back, individually, if you will come and share more in depth about what you're doing. But I'm also curious about, you're bringing men on, that are involved, not involved, have things to say, so that we can open up the dialogue grander.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that possible?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
men have to see men role models. Go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Sahara? I see your mouth moving.
But for me, for the work that I'm doing, that actually sounds very difficult, because unfortunately, like, this is not just a Muslim problem, but all male panels is like a global problem, really, in like pretty much every field. And so I think men have had a lot of time to say what they want to say, and it's time to give women the microphone. And so, I mean, for me, really, like, if I'm organizing an event, I'm not gonna give the space, the platform to men. I'm gonna
Okay.
invite, but I want the audience to be mixed. And so that's really one of the problems, is like, when women speakers are invited to mosques, they're for a women only audience, or they're talking about a topic that's specifically about women. And so they're not really held as experts in like a wide variety of fields like men are. And so that's one of the things that I want to challenge. And I guess, like, one other thing that I would add is, like, a lot of our work is within the Muslim community, but one thing I want to talk about is how we can collaborate across different communities. And one of the things that I'd like to request my Christian and Jewish and other colleagues is to, when, let's say your church or your synagogue or your interfaith group organizing an event where you're inviting a Muslim leader to speak, don't always invite the imams, invite some female scholars to speak as well. But the really common things that irks me to no end is when interfaith panels invite men to talk about the topic of women in Islam. It's just like,
Yeah,
I
it
mean, I
seems
don't.
kind of strange, doesn't it? Like my synagogue, we invite we have panels of all shapes and sizes and colors and things, but I have to agree with you, and I wasn't going to, Sahara, but I have to, because I have done I've done what we call roundtables with my women's group, and I will invite men to facilitate whatever conversation it is, and men, I have found, have a harder time, and this is not a judgment because I love men. They have a harder time facilitating a conversation as opposed to just holding the mic and talking. I mean,
So
go
I think,
ahead.
I mean, I wanted to add on to what Zahra was
Yeah.
saying. I completely agree that that men have actually had plenty of time to voice their opinions, and have had so much time in the spotlight. And so actually, it's not we're not doing a disservice to them by
By not.
focusing on women's voices in particular. But in order to address that question of including men within an audience, or within our discussions, within movements and our efforts and so on. The question that you were asking, Marilyn, I think it has one of the things that I've done, both in my scholarship, but as well as in my teaching and in general, in my approach to Muslim feminism, is to take seriously, very seriously, the category of gender as not women just having gender, and that everybody actually has gender. And I mean, apart from the fact that I don't believe that gender is binary and so on and so forth, I also think that, in particularly, if you talk about men as having gender and what that means for men, and talking about masculinity and concepts of masculinity that Muslim men in particular have grown up with, I think is a really important step to having men sort of think reflectively about their position and how they may have been, you know, taking advantage of their privilege, or what kind of privileged space that they occupy, and how that affects the women in their lives, whether at work or at home or in the mosque or whatever. And so really talking seriously about masculinity, it may or may not, be a way to include men, but certainly addresses many of the issues that come up when we talk about women only, is to actually talk about men too.
So I agree with it all. That's, I think, part of my personal problem, is that I agree with it all. I feel like, yeah, women get the mic, and yeah, but how can we have the mic if men aren't gonna, be listening, and, we got to open these conversational stuff. So I think what I would ask each of you, if you're interested and willing, is to, kind of pick a topic that you feel is pertinent to the work you're doing, who you are in the work, and where you're going. And then let's build individual shows around each of you, because I want to know more. Like Mary, I want to know more. I want to know more about your experience. I want to know more about, the people that you're involved with. But I also want to know the good. I want to know the good that's being done, not just,
Yes.
I want to know the good that's being done, that's moving forward, not just the tough road, but the good, the things that you're accomplishing. So if you would be willing, I would love to have you each back to explore more in an hour of, of whatever topic you choose, if that's okay with all of you.
Excellent.
Yeah. Because
I'd love to do
because this was just an hors d'oeuvre. I want more.
that.
Right. So,
Right.
April, I'm going to come back to you,
Okay.
because you helped start all this. So based on like what based on what you heard, based on, what is going on, what was the final wisdom from today, would you say? And was there some one little nugget that you could like summarize?
I think a lot of us talked about how women are people, and we have a lot of different forces that are working against us and for us also. And so when we look at a woman and we want to help a woman, we have to help the whole woman. We can't just say, well, we're helping women today. And so today we're not worried about whether she's Latina or whether she's Muslim or whether she's Catholic. We have to help the entire person. And that is something that's, I think, we're trying to get better at.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I heard. What were you going to say, Teresa? You sound like you had something else to add.
Well, I'm just really excited about having this conversation. That what I'm hearing is it's really important. So in our lives, we've been able to have an opportunity to articulate our voice within religious contexts where we've been silenced. So I guess, if anything, like whether you're an educator or an activist, I think it's our, my passion to let other women have their voice.
Okay.
So and that will lead hopefully to more inclusive spaces for women and affirming spaces for women.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we're on that hour. That's why I know, I want more. Mary, I want to hear more from you and Teresa and both Saharas, and I want to hear more about all this. So I'm going to come back around, and we'll connect with each of you, and invite you back on, and let's pick a subject that we, and explore it even more. Okay?
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you
Okay,
you.
so much,
terrific.
everybody.
Thank you
Thank
so
Nice to
much.
meet
And
everyone.
April, thank you for helping
Yes.
put this together.
Yes, April.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much, and
I'm
thank you
fine.
everyone out there for being with us today. And we will see you very, very soon. Oh yeah, my books, 4 of them on Amazon. Well, one's not there yet, but it's coming. In Just One Afternoon, Listening to the Hearts of Men. In Just One Afternoon, Twins, Millennials, and soon opioid people impacted by opioid addiction. And then after that will be Black fathers and families that have lost a child, and then surviving rape and sexual abuse. So be on the lookout for more from me and more shows and all of that. And because we too like to offer a voice to to unvoiced, a voice to unvoiced. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.